One in 5 Americans suffer from chronic pain. Many are now using CBD for relief.
Activists are hoping pot could be legalized nationwide by the end of 2019.
When you look at premium cannabis, the Illinois House approved legalizing recreational marijuana.
Welcome to The Budding Report, a weekly show centered around all things cannabis. Please join us in welcoming our host, founder, and CEO of Budding Capital Investment Group, as well as Simple Changes, a CBD social selling company, Charles Horton, and his co-host, Melissa Nasits, as they share the latest in cannabis news, conduct interviews with top leaders in the cannabis space, and promote some of the latest in science and innovation. And now to our host, Charles Horton.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Budding Report. Melissa, welcome back from San Diego.
It's great to be back, although I'm already missing the beach a bit, but it's good to be home.
Dr. Shaw, welcome again.
Good to see you guys, as always.
And I hope we can do this live with you one day. This is an exciting episode today. We have an ex-Super Bowl champ, Marvin Washington, and Robert Cartee, who has been a producer in his life and done TV and movie production. So we have a great list of guests today, but first we want to talk about some of the stuff in the news. There's an article in the news today that the FDA researched and found that a lot of CBD companies either have no CBD at all, or they have much less than they advertise, or they have carcinogens in it. They have lead, or they have other pesticides in it. As we all know, that the hemp or the cannabis plant sucks in everything from the soil and takes it all in. And matter of fact, we were just talking about it before we got on. They even used it at Chernobyl to remediate the land issues that are around that area. And hopefully nobody's using that oil in their products at all. But that's in the news today. And what I wanted to do is bring in our Vice President of Operations from Simple Changes and talk to you about certificates of analysis. So those are documents that you should read before you're using any CBD oils. It's from a third-party lab that tells you what is in the plant. So Tony, welcome. You want to tell us a little bit about reading a certificate of analysis, please?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, so when you are choosing CBD, and we obviously recommend that everyone get on a daily regimen of CBD and full spectrum oil. First things first, has the product been third-party tested? When you read the news article, so many of these companies are not having their products tested. There is no place to ensure that you are getting the cannabinoids in your oil. So that's the first question. Make sure that you can access the certificate of analysis. Now, most times you're going to find this information on the company's website. If you cannot find it, you can reach out to the company directly and ask them for their certificate of analysis. The first thing that you should do when you're looking at a certificate of analysis is you look for the accreditation. It's really important that the third-party lab has been accredited, and there's multiple accreditation processes and programs out there, but you want to ensure that it is an accredited third-party lab, because just as there are, unfortunately, rogue companies out there that are selling products that don't have CBD in them or have low counts of CBD, there are also third-party labs that are testing products that aren't necessarily accredited. They're not certified to do that testing. So that's very important. The next thing that you want to look for on your COA is when was the lab report approved? So this is very important, because what happens is a company may have their first run of products tested, may have their first batch of products tested, but then not test further batches down the road. So you want to ensure that the dates line up with the products that you're using, the batch numbers line up. This is really important, because they may be promoting or have on their website a certificate of analysis that is 2-3 years old for oil that is not in your product. That's why it's so important that you ensure that the certificate analysis that you're looking at is specific for the batch of products that you are thinking of purchasing. The next question that you should really look at is, does the report confirm that it's free of contaminants? As Charles said, hemp plants are bioremediators. In other words, they are going to pull any contaminant, they're going to pull any lead, they're going to pull anything in the soil into the plant, and therefore it will be in the oil. So it's very important, in addition to the cannabinoid test, which we have up on the screen here, that you also look for the full workup, which includes heavy mineral content as well as soil analysis. So you want to make sure that you're not just looking at cannabinoids, but you're also looking for these other reports, because they are just as important. Now, the next thing that you want to really look at, and you can see that right here on the COA, is how much CBD is in the product, or cannabinoid, as you see right there. You want to ensure that this matches what you're looking at with the actual bottle. So if you are taking 750 milligrams, that is a reference point to the CBD that is in your product. You want to ensure that it has 750 milligrams on the testing label. And as you can see here, this is a full spectrum hemp oil with 750 milligrams on the label. And you can see it's just over 760 milligrams on the CBD test. In addition, to the left, you're going to notice that because this is a full spectrum product, you're also going to see all of the other cannabinoids that are in the product as well. So it's good to take a look at those as well, because oftentimes you will be getting a CBD isolate. And when they strip out these other cannabinoids, obviously it doesn't give you the full entourage effect that you may be looking for the product. So these are just a few of the things that you should be looking at when you look at a COA test. There are a bunch of more things that you want to look at. As Charles was saying, you want to look at the minerals. You want to look and make sure that there is no heavy mineral content or any contaminants. You want to make sure there's a soil analysis, because it's so important with hemp plants. But these are all things that you should be looking at. These are all things you should be asking.
Now, the THC level, for it to be legal in all these different states and federally, has to be below a certain amount. Do you want to talk about that?
That's correct. So if you noticed on the COA analysis, right next to the CBD content was THC. The second point you should be looking for is the amount of THC. So what you're going to find is, in the industry, when you go to these master growers, what you're going to find is that they're focusing in on the highest strains to ensure the highest levels of cannabinoid in the product and the lowest amounts of THC, because although THC is in a full spectrum hemp oil, you don't want to have high amounts, because if you have high amounts, it actually breaks the rules that are set by the federal government. So it must be below 0.3. So as you can see here, not only does it show you the amount of cannabinoid, it also shows that we are well below 0.3%, which is the requirement on the THC content. So those are both things that you should really be looking for.
And Tony, what are the importance of the other cannabinoids that are in? How can people find out what they need, what cannabinoids they should be looking for?
Yeah, so that is constantly getting updated. Right now, we say there's over 125 cannabinoids in the full spectrum hemp oil that you would receive. There's over 450 compounds. All of this plays a role in your overall health and wellness. So when you talk about CBD, that is just one of many cannabinoids that play a role. And what we talk about when we say entourage effects is all of these cannabinoids work together to help with your overall health. So it's really important that you take a look and ensure in the analysis that you're not just getting CBD, but you are getting full spectrum, which gives you all of the cannabinoids.
That's great to have a doctor on the show that has dedicated his life to much of the science of cannabinoids. Dr. Shaw, what are your thoughts that you'd like to add on this?
Well, I think Tony did a great job providing a very detailed overview of, interpreting a certificate of analysis, and as well as the many benefits of the entourage effect. I would only add that it's very important to determine that some basic microbiology has been done, which normally it would be on a reputable COA, because you want to make sure that there are no molds, there is absence of bacteria or some kind of fungi, because that can translate to some potential risk, as well as heavy metals. And then when you consider the fact that a lot of these individuals are using CBD tinctures sublingually, you're potentially getting some pretty nasty elements that bypass the first pass effect, which is where anything really ingested goes through the liver, which is our detoxifying organ. And if you're missing out on that, and you also happen to have some metal content in there, you could be in some bad shape.
Melissa, I know you're an avid user of the product. Have you ever looked before to find out what? Have you ever asked and looked at a COA before?
I actually have. More recently, actually, because I became more educated, realizing I always try and do research anytime I'm going to buy a product, especially with the cost of CBD products. I'm putting my money where my mouth is, literally. I don't want to put anything that's not of the highest quality. So that's where it first came into play. But it's also very important to me as far as the THC level, because in a lot of the areas that I've worked, they require drug testing. And you've got to be super careful about that. I mean, and that's one of the things, like you mentioned, if they're not being current, it's not hard for that THC level to creep on up there. And suddenly you test for that. And now you're having to go back, retest if you're lucky enough to be able to do that. So I think that it's super important. I think ingredients are important in anything. Like, I believe one of our previous guests said, when you have an apple, you want to know where it came from. Is it covered in pesticides? Anything you're ingesting, you should know what you're putting in your body.
So I think the lesson here is to be sure you know how to read a certificate of analysis, and that whatever CBD products you're using or any of the cannabinoids that you use, that you research and you know what's in the products. When I started looking into this industry, I would go out and go to different stores and I would ask them, because I was told in advance to ask for the certificate of analysis. And I would say about half the stores would say they have no earthly idea what I'm talking about, and half the stores would have it and would talk about what's in it. So that's a good thing to know. Be sure you do not buy from someone who does not have a certificate of analysis and know how to explain what's in their products. So that covers the first part of the show on the growing news. We're going to go off to commercial break, and right afterwards, up next is Marvin Washington, a ex-Super Bowl champion, is going to be joining us. So that's pretty exciting. Be right back.
Coming to you after our hike that we finished. Buster exercises 3 miles. Today is a recovery day because he did 8-mile hike over the weekend, broken up into 2. But what I want to share with you is this company here called Simple Changes. I learned about them and I absolutely love the concept. It's wellness, community, and organization. So as you can see here, I love the wrapping. I love purple, and it comes with 3 products. So I've been trying them out. First, it's the hemp oil spray, then it's the hemp oil dropper, and the hemp oil ball. So I'll be trying all of these out. I've been exploring them, exploring ingredients. I met with the team on Zoom. Really, really, really neat product. And I love the fact that they also want to incorporate healthy practices. So they come with a little journal and something about Simple Success Diet. So, Simple Changes. You're so entertained, huh? Papa. Hey, ready? Papa.
Well, welcome back. I'm very excited to introduce our next guest, Marvin Washington. He is a Super Bowl champion, like Charles mentioned. He's played in the NFL for about 11 years with 3 teams, the New York Jets, the Denver Broncos, and the San Francisco 49ers. If I'm not incorrect, I believe it was with the Broncos that you won that Super Bowl champion. So congratulations. But I'm also equally as excited because he has been a voice of former NFL players in the NFL's concussion lawsuit, which I think is something so pertinent today. He's addressing truth about the outcomes and effects of chronic traumatic injuries. He is an advocate for prescription opioid abuse and addiction through cannabis, and just a cannabis and CBD advocate. We're so excited to have you here, Marvin. Please tell us some more about yourself.
Thanks for having me. I think you pretty much covered it. I'm an advocate for athletes in this space. Well, I'm a co-founder of a group called Athletes for Care, that athletes go out and promote the medicinal benefits of the cannabis plant, whether it's THC or CBD or any other cannabinoids. And we started this in 2017. We had a handful of guys. Now we have over 300 guys from all, the 4 major sports and all the other alternative and disciplines like rugby and track and field and snowboarding and what have you. And the biggest thing that I'm doing right now is my attorneys and I, we're getting groups together and we're writing an amicus brief to the Supreme Court because 3 years ago I sued the DOJ and Jeff Sessions at the time for the legalization of cannabis because we're going after the constitutionality of it, and it's unconstitutional. You can't say that it has no medicinal benefits, and it's dangerous when you grow it and you patent it. And so we're going after it. Me and my 4 plaintiffs, and so we got some groups from the Last Prisoner Project, Americans for Safe Access, Gridiron Greats, and we got individuals like Rachel Rapino and Billie Jean King and Isaiah Thomas, the Hall of Fame basketball players, and a plethora of athletes individually that have signed on to the briefs that we're going to present to the Supreme Court to let them know that it's just not me and my 4 plaintiffs, but there's a collective out there that we want to have a full repeal and have it legalized, not descheduled, because we go from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. I'm in the cannabis space. That's going to put me out of business, because then everybody's going to have to go through FDA approval. So we'll go back to the black market, because the FDA approval is 3 or 4 years. So we're going after the full legalization and just doing cannabis business, man. That's where I am right now.
What's the status of that case right now?
Like I said, the Supreme Court doesn't hear every case, and so you have to ask for them to hear you, because we have an expedited. We're trying to in the district appellate court. They put it on the DEA, but the DEA said they could not reschedule a drug, and even if they did go under DEA or DOJ review, their average review is anywhere from 9 to 20 years to decide. And some of these kids and two of the kids in my case, they have the extractable epileptic seizures and stroke and things of that nature. They need the medicine now. I can't send my full spectrum or THC products to other athletes that have a prohibition, and these guys need medicine now, and it's a big alternative to opiates and benzodiazepines. So we're writing this brief for them to hear us, and I know it's a conservative court with Judge Roberts, but look what's come out of that court. You had the ACA Act, you had the Marriage Equality Act, you had the Dreamers. They got their deal affirmed, and the LGBT community got their civil rights confirmed, and that's coming out this court. So we're going to make a strong push to get heard. And if we get in front of the court, I think we're going to put a pretty good argument in front of them, from the unconstitutionality to the etymology of it even being written, because Richard Nixon wanted to go after 2 groups. He wanted to go after the counterculture hippies of the 60s and the 70s, and wanted to go after African Americans. So he couldn't go after them. So he did put cannabis on Schedule 1, despite him having the Schaefer report that said everything that we know about cannabis now, all the medicinal benefits. It's not a gateway drug. It can, do community good more than harm and whatever. He had all of this, but he chose to put it on Schedule 1. He got some senators. They got the bill together, wrote it, and it was passed in both houses and signed by the president in less than 30 days. So it's about time that we had this fight, and I feel good about it.
That's amazing. I really think that the criminalization of marijuana has led to so much negativity, not just in sports, but in, like you said, with the counterculture, Black Americans. I think that that's so pertinent, especially today, and to look back and see what actually caused this. But just to switch back, you talked about being in this court case, and obviously you've been an advocate for some time. But when exactly did you become an advocate for CBD? Were you currently playing, and sort of why did it happen?
In 20 years, after I retired from football, I went into the capital markets and worked for some boutique houses in Merrill Lynch and things of that nature. And I got introduced to this space in 2014. And when I got into the space, there was only 3 athletes. There was me, Ricky Williams, and Cal Turley. And, it was only 6 years ago, but in cannabis, it seems like it's 60 years ago, because I always tell people, like, Oregon and Colorado went off in 2012. And I think that's really started the second movement, because California has been having a medical side and whatever. But when they legalized adult use, and Colorado and Oregon did it, it really started this movement to happening. And if you look at it, 8 years is nothing. That's like, you know, the Wright brothers taking off a Kitty Hawk in 2012, and we're still in the single propeller age. You know, it damn near pushing the airplane down the runway. So we're not in the twin propeller age or the jet age, but we're getting there. We're getting there. But this thing is going to take a turn because of the COVID-19 and shutdown, and you're seeing a lot of Chapter 13s and mergers and acquisitions, which were going to happen anyway, because I thought there were some companies that were too overvalued. And then you had a lot of bad players that was in there, you know, making these medical claims, getting their products taken off the shelves. And also, as you said on your last segment, you know, not having it tested, not having a soil analysis. And I think that's important. So I like when the FDA comes down and does that to companies, because if you're going to say you're going to have 300 milligrams of CBD or 500 milligrams of CBD in there and all these other cannabinoids, make sure they're there, and make sure you get a soil analysis too. Make sure there's no molds, metals, because this is something that I think should be in everybody's medicine cabinet in the country. But this is something that I'm giving to my grandmother, my aunts, my uncles, my sisters, my brothers. You know, so we got to make sure as an industry, we don't have a self-regulating organization yet. So the government has to do it, but we have to make sure that, because we're giving this to our people that we love. So it has to do what it says it's going to do. And it can't have any molds or metals into it, because then you're going to have another problem. You're going to cause people to get sick and possibly, you know, die because of you've taken shortcuts and you haven't taken the proper steps.
Hey, I'm with you. I'm giving it to my mother too, and I do not want to be giving my mother things that will harm her, just like I'm not going to visit her right now because I don't want to, she's in a higher risk group and I don't want to take the risk of accidentally giving her COVID-19. I've seen a lot of the interviews from sports professionals that are talking about using marijuana instead of opioids, and many of them are saying that the doctors are very excited and happy to freely prescribe opioids to professional sports players. So regarding sports or pro sports, injury recovery, and pain management, what changes, go into a little bit more of what changes you're advocating for?
Well, yeah, I want them to be able to use it and take it off the prohibited list. You know, when we started this fight with the NFLPA, because that's the players union, that's why I went to, not the NFL. You know, the first thing out the guy's mouth was, well, we're not going to let our players ingest marijuana. Then after an hour and a half of conversation, he wanted more information. And so that has led to the NFL, the biggest sports league in the world, the most profitable in the world, to make a shift on their cannabis policy with this last CBA. So guys will not be suspended. Guys will not be fined. Guys will not be publicly humiliated and ostracized because they're using this plant. And if there's ever a sport that should use cannabis as an alternative to the opiates and benzodiazepine, it's football, because there's 3,200 football players, but there's 20,000 former football players. So when you're talking about the 20,000 former football players, they're 4 times more likely to abuse opiates than general society. So that kind of tells you, because we know what's happening with general society with opiate use. So my community, my alumni, we're getting our butt kicked with this. So let's try to give them a natural alternative that's non-toxic and non-addictive. And I think we're going to get there, because when I first started, it was, you know, if, but now it's just a matter of when. So, you know, the NBA doesn't test for it. The NHL takes their hands off to it. Major League Baseball and the NFL is finally turning around. So, like I said, in 2012, that's 8 years. Imagine in 2030, 2035, athletes are fully going to be able to use this product, and it's going to do the same things that the opiates does for them. Now, if you have like a broken finger or an acute, yeah, you want a pain pill, all right, to block the pain and take the pain away so you can play it, whatever, but not over 6 to 8 months. Don't start this pharmaceutical regimen in July in training camp and take that over all the way to February, January. Now you extrapolate that over my career, 11-year career, and then you expect me to walk away the game and turn that spigot off. For a lot of guys, it doesn't happen. It does not happen. So we want to give them something that's non-toxic, non-addictive. And we've been medicating with this plant for thousands of years. let's get back to it, because we've been on this opiate kick since, you know, the 30s and kicked up in the 50s with the what's the name of the family? They did Oxycontin.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, in the 50s. And so now let's get back to something that's natural and that has been put on here and that we've medicated for thousands of years, that when the hunters and gatherers were going out and they come home, they grab that plant and chew on it because it relaxes them, it gave them, you know, got rid of the anxiety, made their body relax and whatever. Let's get back to that. You know, let's get back to that. And I think there's a turn in this country that's happening right now of everybody's being vegan, everybody's trying to grow their own gardens. A lot of people during the pandemic and whatever, but this is where we're going to go. And I think cannabis can lead that way, whether it's THC, whether it's CBD, whether it's CBN, whether it's THCA, what have you. We don't even know what all these cannabinoids can do, but we're going to find out.
Dr. Shaw, what kind of questions or comments do you have on what Marvin said?
Well, I mean, Mr. Washington had numerous great points, and I'm really impressed with the activities involved in, especially this Supreme Court case that they've submitted. Where to start? I think the point about it's very important for the industry to try to self-regulate, because what will tend to happen is we do want some degree of oversight. The FDA would be appropriate for ensuring consistency and quality of products. But what I'm always afraid of is that once you start having too much government encroachment, there's deep pockets coming from bigger companies. And if they can afford to have incredibly burdensome regulation, that's going to put all the smaller outfits that probably produce really great stuff out of business. With respect to cannabinoids, he's absolutely right. It's just the beginning. Being involved in cannabinoid research myself, I can tell you there are a lot of therapeutic benefits that are known, many more to come. And I foresee this being a very common over-the-counter use product, as well as, what pharmaceutical companies can try to, protect on their end for a variety of issues. And I've been pushing for some time that I think professional athletes, really all athletes, would benefit from CBD-based products, not only from kind of the day-to-day management of inflammation, but the chronic pain issue within the context of potential opiate dependence long-term. And, being in the, corporate medical arena, we have what's called industrial athletes. So these are the guys that are out there, whether it's in the construction industry, the power industry, where they're referred to as industrial athletes because they're working these very difficult jobs day in and day out. And in order for them to have a long-term career, they have to take care of themselves just as well. And I have pushed for some time that I think CBD and the related cannabinoids can be very helpful in that approach. And earlier to Melissa's point, you really have to come up with something else, because I know as a medical director that I cannot, clear someone for work who's in a safety sensitive position that's on narcotics. Whereas if they were taking a CBD product that was THC free, for example, that would be permissible. And I actually kind of led the way on that in the power industry of setting standards for CBD a couple years ago in how to deal with it in the work environment, because I saw that it was not going to go away and it was actually going to just continue to grow.
Thank you. Mr. Washington, just wanted to ask you one more question, and just a quick answer. We're kind of running out of time, but what is your position on recreational marijuana use?
Adult use? I'm all for it. Just like alcohol, if you're 21 and over or 18 and over, because at 18, the government has said you can go to war. So why can't you use cannabis? I'm all for adult use, not recreational, it's adult use. And people, it's been my experience, like people smoke, not to get high, but they want to feel better. Cannabis is medicine. So it's for adult use. If you're going to go below that and use it as medicine for the kids that have the epilepsy, strokes, and seizures and cancer, yeah, put that under the care of a doctor. But for adult use, I think that's coming. It has to. If we're going to have accept a society ill of alcohol, why not cannabis?
I agree with your position entirely. Thank you so much for being on. We're going to head off for a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Coming to you from the outdoors where I do my heat training, and I did my repeats on the hills. It's actually pretty empty, but it's kind of close to 90 degrees. So that's when I squeeze in whatever I can. But I'm actually here to share what Simply Start, Simply Satisfy is. So this organic hemp oil, this is the serum Simply Start, and you can take it twice a day or once. I already took both of them in this morning, so now it's lunchtime. Real quick and easy, yummy, delicious, 30 calories. The other one is Simply Satisfy. So it's a spray and also 3 sprays. You could do it once a day or twice a day. Again, I did it this morning. I'm doing it now at lunch. It helps you take care of your health and wellness. So learn more about them. Remember, 3 simple changes on how you can incorporate into your life. You can learn more at the link below. So stay safe and keep moving, keep training, and take care of your spirit, mind, and body.
Well, we're back again with Robert Cartee. He's a former producer and cannabis advocate, a champion of public awareness regarding injustice of cannabis prohibition. He is a speaker on multiple outlets regarding government tactics and unethical behavior when enforcing and prosecuting cases. So welcome, and let's just kick it off. How did you first get involved with the legal system as it relates to cannabis?
25 years. I was living in California for 18 of those, and my wife, I saw some medical issues that cannabis helped with, and we were actually originally recommended way before it was legal to use cannabis for some of her medical issues. And at that point, I didn't like the idea of some of the problems that we're talking about today with the quality of products. So I basically started cultivating my own. Did that for 20 years. And at a certain point, we decided we wanted to get out of the LA area, and I wanted to move back home to Georgia, came back home to Georgia and continued to grow our medicine forest for about 15 years. And all of a sudden, one day, 2 officers came down and had a little talk with my wife, who was down walking the dog. And within 10 or 15 minutes, there was about 35 or 40 officers and members of a SWAT team going through my home.
Wow, that's got to be pretty scary. How many plants did you have?
Well, I had several plants, but they were relatively small, about 2.5 feet. What I would typically do is I would grow for about 7 months in a seed green cycle, and it would give me enough finished product for me and my wife to treat ourselves for approximately 2 years. So about every 2 years, I would grow for 7 months and then take the remainder of that time off and just live our lives.
So you're thinking maybe that 30 members of a SWAT team was a little overboard for your situation?
Well, yeah, I'm 55. My wife's 53. She's 4 foot 10 inches tall and about 95 pounds. We've never sold anything. The police actually couldn't even find anybody that knew me or my wife smoked marijuana. It's something, just like you don't talk about you get up in the morning and take aspirin to people. We used it as a medication. We didn't use it recreationally. We used it to treat ourselves. So they couldn't even find anybody that knew we even smoked.
Wow. So what went on further? So you've got SWAT teams show up. What happened after? Were you arrested at this point? Was there? What was the legal ramifications of this?
Yeah, I was arrested. My wife was allowed to turn herself in following afternoon. Taken off to jail, held for 36 days without a bond hearing, told that we were a threat to society. And now neither one of us have any type of criminal record or anything at all. And we're both more than a half a century old. And while I was sitting in jail, given no information, all of a sudden I found out that I was being charged with trafficking. The same thing that El Chapo was charged with. I was charged with possession with intent to sell, even though there was no evidence that any sales had ever occurred, because they haven't. And I was charged with possession of multiple firearms in the commission of a felony.
Yeah, that's like you're not supposed to wear a mask and have a firearm, even if you have a license. So how has this impacted your life and your lifestyle? What happened? How did you get out of it? Tell us more about that.
Well, they basically went in on a search and destroy mission. That's what they do in a lot of these cases, because essentially it's financial for them. They basically put out disinformation on the news. It was covered in Atlanta on all 4 networks and over 50 papers in the Southeast. And we were basically portrayed, they weighed soil, said that there was 58 pounds of cannabis when there was actually only about 4. They weighed wet soil, and put out all kinds of disinformation and tried to go through, essentially pollute the jury pool and scare you. The charges weren't substantiated, but yet we were facing between 55 and 75 years in state prison for growing a little medicine for ourselves. And the state basically went on a search and destroy mission. They went out and tried to keep us from being able to make bond. They tried. They put us under surveillance for more than 8 months. They were monitoring our phones, following us around. And when they'd done this search, I mean, they went through more than 30 years of tax returns, bank statements, everything in the world. They knew that we weren't guilty of anything they were charging for, but that's not what they're looking for. They're looking for a little publicity, and they're looking to get somebody to take a plea as opposed to looking to do what's right and what's good by the justice system. So what I had done is after 36 days in jail, they try to keep you in jail and not let you get bond so you can't be proactive in your case. I got lucky enough to meet probably the best marijuana attorney in the United States, came to visit me in jail, and she was actually sent there by 2 of the local police officers who felt what the county was doing to me was wrong, and came in to visit me about 11:30 at night. Her name is Catherine Bernard. She's a true hero, and said that basically what was done was wrong, and she wanted to represent me in the case. At that point, we went through a process where basically the state just tried one thing after another. We finally got to the point where they started postponing it time after time after time. And my attorney finally got a motion to suppress hearing. And the Superior Court judge determined that essentially the officer had not given the magistrate judge correct information. He had lied. He had made misrepresentations, and granted a motion to suppress all evidence that was gained during the search warrant, which we were happy as can be. About 2 weeks later, we found out that the state had decided to appeal the case to the Georgia State Court of Appeals, even though they knew they had no chance of winning it. Again, making our lives more difficult just to do the briefs for the appeal cost and they kept me and my wife separately. So we each had to do things with a separate attorney. So another $20,000 for an appeal they knew they weren't going to win. And essentially I was on house arrest almost the entire time. The conditions, my bond, I couldn't consume alcohol. I couldn't go into a restaurant that had alcohol. We couldn't, I had to be on my property from 9 p.m. till 6 a.m. And this one, they extended it another 11 months by doing the appeal. Of course, the Georgia State Court of Appeals affirmed the decision of the Superior Court. And at that point, about 14 days later, the state dropped all charges against us. But this is after essentially being abused and costing more than $100,000. And they basically were they weren't interested in justice. They wanted to get a plea. During the process, right before the motion to suppress hearing, the district attorney actually came to our lawyers and said, look, here's the deal. If you take 3-year probation, no jail time, we'll essentially do the deal today, but you have 24 hours to make the decision. If not, we're going to go full bore and try to get 55 to 75 years in prison, which I'm not the kind of person that takes kindly to being extorted. So I decided I was going to fight and take the risk of going to prison.
Well, good for you. I mean, honestly, it sounds like it was a political move, very much so. So glad you stood up to it, and obviously glad that the case was dismissed. The best outcome for that situation. Just a quick last question, I think. So having been through all of this, what are your plans to help the cannabis industry and others that are going through similar situations?
Well, I currently work with a bunch of different advocacy groups online. I'm also involved with Peachtree NORML, which is the local chapter in Georgia of the NORML organization, to not only reform and end prohibition on marijuana, but actually to try to do good for the people that have been abused by our criminal justice system, that are currently sitting in prison for essentially a plant. These people have never harmed anybody in their life. There's never been a victim to any crime, but some of these people have already spent decades in our state jails.
It's amazing what all you've gone through over a plant. I can't say, given the decision that you had, I don't know that I would have been strong enough to make it, but I'm very happy that you did. Dr. Shaw, any comments or questions?
I just, again, want to really express, my admiration that you fought against this witch hunt, and were, victorious at the end. It can only make the movement stronger. And I think eventually law enforcement will start to recognize the futility in criminalizing a plant that offers tremendous medicinal benefits, that's been used for thousands of years, and really only in the last 100 years has been painted with much more of a brush of criminality than ever before.
Well, Robert, I really appreciate you being on today. For the viewers, if you would like to contact either of our guests, we're putting their information up on the screen so you can contact them. And that is our show today. So thank you for joining us. Please come back and watch the Budding Report. We go live every Wednesday at 11 o'clock ish. Please join us next week as we discuss more up-to-date cannabis news, and we're joined by Michael Brooks. He has quite the story going on right now, and Tony Solis of Simple Changes. So thank you very much for joining, and we'll see you back next week.